All right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It is Thursday and getting a 2 p.m. start today just to make sure I had some of my ducks in a row rather than none of my ducks in a row. Very interesting times that we're living through. And I did use Minnesota not so nice because you wouldn't think, right? I mean, the way they talk there with the A's and all that, would they be the state you'd think you'd see the rioting in the street, the tear gas from the federal goons dispatched by the president? I mean, I wouldn't have thought it would be Minnesota. I would not have been. And I'm kind of mixed. I have mixed views because we do have tyranny in this country. And Trump is the latest, and I think perhaps the worst manifestation of that. People like Bush, presidents like Bush, maybe Nixon, right? He sent the National Guard out there to Kent State. They shot 4 people, 4 dead in Ohio. This country has a long and bloody history, but in recent years, what Trump is doing is kind of unprecedented. Let's put it that way. And I know a lot of people say, well, there's precedent, in 91, 92, the LA riots we saw, I think it was HW send the National Guard into LA. It's a little different. I believe in 92, 91, whoever was the governor of California at that time, maybe it was Duke Magian, asked for the troops to come in. There was clearly a situation that was out of law enforcement's hands in Los Angeles. And that's very different after the televised beating of Rodney King, right? He had been beaten previously, and then it was shown on TV, and people were so angry. But it was a little different because in that case, it was the LAPD's actions that triggered the street violence, the street unrest. In this case, it's the federal troops, the federal agents. I know they're not really called troops. It's the federal, representatives that are causing the very problem that now Trump wants to use to justify, to leverage into more, actually military on the ground. And it's as far as I know, I'm not aware of anything in recent years that quite matches that. I believe perhaps in the wake of the George Floyd killing by Minneapolis police, that was the same city, there were some National Guard troops may have been sent. I'm not certain about that. There were riots. No, it was, riots that followed Black Lives Matter. But again, it was not the federal government that created the very conditions that now it seeks to address through its own violent response, its own use of military in our streets in our cities. So it's sort of another step, and it's a scary step, and it's wrong. And I see. Let me stop that because I'm hearing something that's annoying me, and I'm going to have to turn it off. Mute myself right there if I can. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, so you probably heard me twice. I was just trying to get something there, but obviously failed. Here we go. Call in. Let's see. This is, I believe, my friend Phil. We always take these calls whenever we do. Phil, is that you?
It is. How are you, Mr. Ginsberg?
I'm doing great, but Mr. Ginsberg, what the? Oh, how you doing, Attorney Phil Damon? Do you mind? I just outed your last name. I apologize for that. Maybe I shouldn't have done that.
I'm not embarrassed by my last name. And Attorney Hal Ginsberg, good to see you doing the people's work and trying to help where you can.
It's been so long, and my sense has been, I'm going to spill a little tea here. You were upset with me. I've taken some positions I'm not sure you agree with. Maybe you're going to call to challenge me today. If that's the case, bring it on. It's always great to hear from you. And I want to say one other thing, Phil. I remember the last time I think I saw you was in Los Angeles about 14 years ago. It was a very, very nice time we had with you. And you said something to me. You said, we'll always be friends. We don't always see each other, And I was very much touched by that. So I hope that's still the case.
Well, before I dialed in, I wrote you a message in the comments, which I might be the only one there.
Love you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, the only one. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm kind of misting up. Honestly, I'm misting up, Phil.
As am I. I'm actually I'm working on a significant trial that's in Singapore, so it's luckily I can call in overnight, and I'm doing it remotely. But I have a few minutes before we have to get back before the judge there, and to be very clear, you are one of my favorite, most astute friends and people in life, and I still use your alarm clock you got for me every day, and I'm very grateful for that. And I'm also grateful for the community you try to bring.
Oh my God, you're tearing up too. We're both crying here. That's really something. And I do remember the alarm clock because we met. The story. Phil was an intern in an office where I was practicing law, and Phil came to me and he said, "I have trouble getting up in the morning." And I went to the local store and bought him a little alarm clock. So
I appreciate it. That was very
funny.
So I had to jog to work every day, and it was not an easy jog from Georgetown over to Indiana. And Hal was probably the most thoughtful and intelligent lawyer, and I say that sincerely, amongst hundreds of lawyers who work for the city of Washington, D.C. And through his good work there and his fancy BMW, we were able to enjoy good times at Front Page and beyond. And I even got to spend part of the night of the birth of his first son with him over at our house in Georgetown before he had to run to the hospital. And Hal has always gone out of his way to build community and to help people. And whether you agree with him or not, you can't dispute the fact that you cannot help but agree that he's trying to do something for the better good of all humanity. And the beauty of it is that in our country, and hopefully in other countries, the ability to have reasonable discourse, thoughtful discourse, and disagree on certain points is done peacefully, thoughtfully, so that real growth and change comes not only from individual to individual, but as a society that tries to continue to better itself over many, many generations so that the human race can continue to survive and not go by the way of dinosaurs. So to my dinosaur friend Hal, I am very grateful to the elder statesman who has been a good mentor to me and many others, if nothing else, by his leadership by example. So thank you, Hal. I just wanted to call in and express my gratitude.
I really appreciate that. I want to just hold you for one more moment if I can, and I think we can come to agreement on something for sure. I mean, how appalling is what we are witnessing in this country right now by this president, and I think specifically what we're seeing in Minnesota?
I'd say it's more than the president. I don't necessarily blame any one person, including President Trump. And the same way that people can disagree about certain things, whether it's the conflicts in the Middle East, whether it's social policy, whether it's domestic policy, as a society, we have to do better. It is very, very sad and very scary to see what's going on all over the country, including in Minnesota, where people are simply being picked up and taken away or beaten, and people are wearing masks and stopping folks without warrants, without probable cause, children separated from their parents, people go missing. In no civilized society, especially this great country, is that something that reasonable minds would support. And I'm not discounting folks who are looking at the arguments that would favor the administration's approach on this, because, again, they have a viewpoint. And for me to simply say that I disagree with them without showing why, or how it's harmful as a society, or the cruelty of it, would nullify the fact that there is some reason somebody is doing it. And I can't say that it's simply pure evil, although it reeks of cruelty. And I don't believe that there is a net benefit to operating this way, where people's rights are so badly violated. However, other people do believe this, and they believe that it is a purging and that it's necessary and that there's some greater good to come from it. But that is not an argument that I can currently subscribe to, and nor one which has been sufficiently justified, because it violates not only the rule of law in certain ways to be interpreted, but if you just look at the cost of humanity, there's very little humanity that we see in every state where these raids have been very, very aggressive. Teenagers taken from their schools, children, grade schoolers, people who are citizens who are working. And quite frankly, just because you're not a citizen doesn't mean you deserve to be whisked away in the middle of the day or at night or fear for your life. And certainly at my firm, we have many clients who have been in this country for many, many years. And some of them, still working on their paperwork. And many of them have chosen to leave before these raids started, beginning last April. They were telling us they really appreciate the legal advice that we might give, which was, hey, we don't really think of anything to worry about. And we didn't really predict that we'd see this kind of action. And they have all self-deported. And that's a big loss because our country really benefits from having the diversity and the exchange of ideas and the ability to talk reasonably when our ideas differ, the way that you try to do on this show. So thank you for trying to...
Beautifully stated. Successful attorney, Phil, calling in. And final comment, you really gave my son some great advice. I know you spoke to him about possibly going to law school, and after talking to you, he went to graduate school at Georgetown in sports management. So you talked him off the ledge, Phil. Thank you.
Much like my pleasure. I hope he does well. And if he wants to work in sports management, have him call me.
We will do that. Thanks so much. And good luck in Singapore.
Thank you. I hope I see you soon, Hal. You're the best. And send you much love. And may everybody in this country and beyond have a peaceful, a blessed day. Be kind to each other and just listen to each other and be respectful and try to move forward together as a country. We have greater things on the horizon. It's a very difficult time right now.
All right. Phil turning a 3-day for me into a 10 from that call. So thanks so much, Phil. I got to let him go at this point. I know he's got a lot of work to do. Would love to hear from you. 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. Did not mean to put him on the spot there at all, but he really set out where we are right now, I think, extremely well. And I do appreciate that. Here's ABC News, and we probably won't be going much to CBS anymore, at least not for a while, owned by Elson family with Barry Weiss as the president of the operation there. Obviously, it's not serious news anymore. It's a propaganda outfit. There you can see that. I'll play the clip real quick, and then we'll talk about CBS News for a moment more. So here we go. ABC News.
The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, says that its agents were trying to apprehend someone who was in the U.S. illegally from Venezuela, who then crashed his car and ran off. 2 people then came out of a house and, according to DHS, started to beat an ICE agent with a shovel or a broom as that agent was struggling with the suspect. DHS says that the agent fired shots fearing for his life, hitting the person that they were initially chasing in the leg. The 2 men who are accused of hitting the officer are now in custody. Now, after all of this happened, take a look at these pictures here. People started to gather in the area. A heavy security presence there. Smoke has been filling the air, as you can see. Reporters on the scene report hearing flashbangs, and demonstrators are yelling at federal agents to get out. Of course, tensions skyrocketing in Minneapolis. This after the fatal shooting of Renee Good just a week ago today. And there have been multiple large-scale protests across the Twin Cities, many resulting in arrests. There's a shot of the crowd right there. As of now, we've not heard of any additional arrests stemming from tonight's incident. But the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, tonight criticizing the federal prisons in Minnesota, saying it is no longer about immigration enforcement, according to him, but it has become a campaign of organized brutality. That is a quote. We'll keep following.
Right, so Tim Walz, the governor, really going out there with a very strong statement. I mean, you can see just how bad things have gotten. The goons, the federal goons in the streets, beating people up, shooting people, and the people in Minnesota increasingly restive, increasingly upset and responding. And so you have a situation where there's a lot of escalation, and that's problematic because what the right is going to do and is doing, and what Trump is doing, is at every opportunity pointing to the reactions that they have provoked and saying, see, we have to crack down because people don't like what we're doing to them. And that is very problematic. By the way, I saw a post by Don. I just want to comment. He wrote, thank you, Nabra. That ain't good news. And I think he was responding, and this is something I did wrong here. The title is Minnesota's Boiling Over. We're alienating NATO allies. Thank you, President Trump. And that is meant ironically. Okay, that was not meant to be a real thank you. That was an ironic thank you. I'm going to change the exclamation point to a frown because it's not, and in fact, a frown with a tear. Because I want to be real clear. I'm not thanking President Trump. Like, I'm seriously thanking him. I mean, I'm like saying, yeah, it's your fault. And I'll change it to thanks, President Trump, the way people would mock President Obama and say, thanks, Obama, when they would talk about something bad that was happening. But to be real clear, no, this is really bad stuff. And I'm not happy about it at all. I think it's awful. I've never really felt quite as hopeless about our country and its direction as I do now. And that includes when W was president, when we had Cheney, when we had Torture Dick, when you had people like John Yoo writing memos saying it's okay to torture. That was bad. That was really bad. This is worse. When we learned that, what was it? With Biden supporting endless war with Russia, and then in the midst of that, going all in for Netanyahu, more drilling than any president ever in 4 years. That was Biden. I was really, really upset. But this guy really takes the cake. This guy is at another level. And I don't know how we deal with that. I've tried to come up with answers. The people of Minnesota are rebelling. They're saying we're not going to take it. We are going to fight back. We're going to push back. And the downside of that is it does give a pretext to Trump to escalate, to Stephen Miller, his hatchet man, to escalate even more. Here's a video. I was like, when I first heard the quote from Walls that, I can't remember what he was saying, that the federal government is instigating this, they're causing the violence. He used a very strong term. I thought maybe that was a little excessive, what Walls said, maybe a little over the top, but then I saw this video.
Chilling new video just now emerging in the immigration crackdown in Minnesota. ICE agents seen bursting through the door of an immigrant family's home in Minneapolis. And what influential podcaster Joe Rogan is now saying about all this. ABC's Faith Abube is there again tonight.
Can you put the guns down? There's kids in this house.
Tonight, terrifying new video shows the view from inside an immigrant family's home after an ICE agent broke down the door with a battering ram.
Show the warrant first.
A woman telling agents they must show a warrant to enter Garrison Gibson's home. Gibson's lawyer says the 37-year-old is an immigrant from Liberia.
Look at this. It's just a paramilitary operation. I don't think most, Phil said something that there are people who are watching this and saying, good, we're glad we're getting rid of these people. And there are. He's right, of course. But the bottom line is most Americans don't have that reaction. Even many Trump supporters feel very differently. I think this is a terrible development, and they're turning against Trump. The problem is, where would they turn? You have a Democratic Party where many representatives and senators are thanking ICE. They're not saying this is outrageous, this is wrong. We're not hearing that. You have a Democratic Party where one of the luminaries on the left, so-called AOC, goes after protesters who are rallying against land sales of stolen land in Palestine by Israelis. And yet she can't be bothered to criticize the actual operation, the theft, the eviction of people from their rightful home. She can't be bothered to criticize that, except to say that the people who are against that are somehow anti-Semitic. So, I don't know where you go with this. I mean, we really are in just a very, very bad place. I'll tell you where to go. Vote green.
War as a child. Gibson was facing removal due to with authorities for years. Homeland Security says he has a lengthy rap sheet.
So if he's this dangerous person, then why are they letting him walk around?
Violent scenes playing out on a daily basis of agents pepper spraying people.
I mean, it's just unbelievable, right? You see that, right? Let me play that again. This is your federal government.
Playing out on a daily basis of agents pepper spraying people. This woman ripped from her car, pleading that she's disabled. Many, including influential podcaster Joe Rogan, are questioning the federal agents' tactics.
And then I can also see the point of view of the people that say, yeah, but you don't want militarized people in the streets just roaming around, snatching people up, many of which turn out to actually be U.S. citizens that just don't have their papers on them. Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to?
So some folks are, praising Rogan for that. I think it's good he brought it up. I don't think it's as strong as I would have preferred. I don't spend a lot of time talking about Joe Rogan. I don't really get the appeal of Joe Rogan. I don't think he's a particularly interesting or provocative broadcaster. I know he's sort of an everyman, and maybe that's the appeal to me. There's not much appeal there. But he's also getting criticized. People say, oh, how dare he voted for Trump, better late than never. Again, I don't shame people for their vote in 24. Both major party candidates were awful, and there was good reason to vote against either one. So if you said, well, I voted for Trump because I couldn't bear to have Kamala president, well, I can sort of get that. I actually can. I wouldn't have ever made that decision. I was 95% for Harris. 95% for Stein, 5% for Harris. I can see why someone would vote for Harris more than I can see why someone would vote for Trump. But I will not condemn anyone for voting for Trump. I will condemn them for supporting this. I just don't see how this is American. It's just not American. Smashing into people's homes, pepper spraying people who are registering their discontent with the current government. I don't see how that's okay. It's not in my world.
1 week since Renee Good was shot and killed by ICE agent Jonathan Ross, amid questions over whether the shooting was justified. Homeland Security officials and multiple sources tell ABC News that he was in fact injured, suffering internal bleeding in his torso, but they did not elaborate on the extent. Tonight, Renee Good's family issuing a new statement.
All right, before we play that, so this is like the defense of the officer shooting at and killing Renee Good is, well, look, he got hurt. He was clearly in harm's way. I don't view that as in any way exoneratory. Is that a word? Exculpatory. I don't think that's exculpatory evidence, because he was too busy fumbling with his gun and holding up his phone to get the hell out of the way, which is what his responsibility was under ICE guidelines. And she wasn't driving at him. She had turned the wheel. We can all see that. He had put himself in front of the car in the first place. The only reason he was hit is because he put himself in front of that car in the first place. So I can't, see the fact that he might have gotten a bruise, or he did. I mean, they're saying they can't confirm it, right? So there's like a question. Some people are doubting it. I saw one video, I think it's posted in Halitics actually, by Michael, that purportedly shows that the officer or the ICE agent, whatever you want to call him, wasn't actually hit by the vehicle. That you can see the way, it was a sort of a mishmash of different videos together. And to me, that didn't persuade me that he wasn't hit. I mean, I think the original image that you see, my sense is the car glanced off him. It didn't really hurt him. You saw him walking around. But even whether he was or wasn't hit, that doesn't seem to me relevant. If he was hit, it's clearly because he put himself in harm's way. He didn't get out of the way when he should have gotten out of the way and could have gotten out of the way. And because he was too busy trying to kill this woman. So, no, I'm not, that doesn't get you anywhere. The fact that you might have been hurt. All right, so there's...
Amid questions over whether the shooting was justified, Homeland Security officials and multiple sources tell ABC News that he was in fact injured, suffering internal bleeding in his torso, but they did not elaborate on the extent.
That's after, by the way, the walking that you just saw, that's after he had murdered, or let's use a different word, after he had killed, I believe, in cold blood. I mean, I guess maybe he was a little bit angry and amped up and worked up, but he put himself in that position. He killed a woman. And after he had killed her, you can see him just walking with supposed injuries.
But they did not elaborate on the extent. Tonight, Renee Good's family issuing supporters, calling Renee the beautiful light of our family, who brought joy to anyone she met.
So awful. 3 children.
And David, Renee Good's family is also asking for peace and accountability. They've now also hired the same attorneys who represented George Floyd's family in their successful wrongful death case. David.
Faith Abube in Minneapolis tonight. Faith, thank you.
All right, that's a really good report. I appreciate ABC News doing that. We saw, I believe, the video of the officer smashing into the home of another immigrant. I mean, it's... I'm not, by the way, this is not like some hearkening back, to the great days of Obama. He was the deporter in chief, the great deporter. It's American policy that is so out of whack, so out of kilter. But it's gotten worse. It's being, the mask is off to the extent there ever was one. The gloves are off. And now Trump using the unrest that he's created to try to justify using the Insurrection Act of 1807 to send the U.S. Army, or at a minimum the National Guard, into. Now, I don't understand. I thought he already deployed the Guard in various places. I guess the argument there is, well, they weren't really being used for law enforcement, right? They're just sort of a backup role. But we have seen, National Guard in D.C. And other places. So maybe DC is an exception to that, not clear. Trump wants to use this law, or he's claiming he's going to, because, the Minnesota can't get itself together, can't get itself under control. And so he is going to, he can't stand the protests, which again are a direct reflection of his actions, his decision making. But he's got to stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists from attacking the patriots of ICE. As I understand it, they can barely, these patriots they can't fill their ranks because what they're doing is very upsetting. Even though the pay is good, apparently you get your student debt forgiven if you join ICE. A woman told, I think it was Breonna Joy Gray, that she, on a lark, sent in an application to ICE just to see what would happen. And she got hired despite the fact that her social media feed is replete with harsh criticism of Trump. So this told her they're not even doing background checks because they're so desperate for bodies. So he's going to send in maybe the National Guard if the corrupt politicians of Minnesota don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrections. So that's interesting because and I thought that using the corrupt politicians was very, very instructive because he's getting that from that Nick Shirley video, right? There was this video that this guy, as far as we know, it's pretty much fake. He's like, I knocked on a door and no one answered, so therefore they must be taking money for running a daycare operation illegally. They're not really running an operation. Apparently, the police had already investigated and concluded they were running an operation. Certainly no proof was adduced of any wrongdoing in the Shirley video. Basically, he rehashed a bunch of old stories, a bunch of old crimes that had already been revealed and investigated by both the state of Minnesota and the federal government, with both playing a role in the investigation and in the prosecutions. The Justice Department under Joe Biden, Trump says they are so corrupt in Minnesota, and yet the state, in fact, did investigate and did prosecute, and so did Joe Biden. So I don't know what the hell, there's no, let me say it this way. I know what he's doing. He's trying to stoke anger, resentment, hatred. That's what Trump is trying to do, division, but there's no there there. There's no there there. And the corrupt politicians are really interesting. This is coming from a guy who big in crypto, big fan of crypto, signing laws to promote crypto while he has his own coin. Corrupt much? Really? I mean, come on. Guy who takes $500 million from Miriam Adelson and then basically promotes an Israel can do whatever the hell it wants policy. Corrupt much? Green lights media mergers so that his political allies, who are not incidentally among the richest people in the world, can take over venerable operations and then convert them into propaganda for this administration in Israel. Corrupt much? I mean, it's really such a pot meat kettle argument for Trump to claim the politicians in Minnesota are corrupt. But he got that, again, from that Nick Shirley video, which made all these allegations, mainly against Ilhan Omar, but I think also against Tim Walz. And there was no evidence that they are corrupt. But we do know how corrupt Trump is. Pure projection there. All right, now I'm getting a call from why is my phone? I'm getting all kind of matter problems. Hey, Stephanie, how are you? Let me see if I can there you go. I got you on the phone. How are you doing today?
I'm okay, Hal. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. And I'm better. I don't know if you heard the call from my great friend Phil earlier in the program, but we were both tearing up. It was very, it was a moment, as they say.
I just tuned in like maybe 10 minutes ago. I don't know. I just wanted to say, if it hasn't been said yet, my concern is that this is all a dry run for elections. This threat of using the Insurrection Act and, what they're doing in the cities. This is getting ready for elections. That's my concern.
So basically, and I think that's a obviously very reasonable concern, very legitimate fear that they're rehearsing how they're going to prevent a free and fair count of the election later this year, the general election.
And to intimidate voters, to intimidate the people who are not likely to vote for Trump, to intimidate all the people that they profile as being likely Democratic voters from voting.
Don't you think, though, let me not disagree with you. I think the election is very much in Trump's mind. But don't you think that's kind of a stupid strategy? Because he's alienating even some of his supporters. As I understand it, Democratic registration is up. Republican registration is down. This is the opposite dynamic we saw in 23, 24. He's definitely pushing people away. Many of the Latinos, he did not clear he got half the Latino vote in 2024, Trump, that is, but he got a high percentage of the vote for Republican for sure. He's losing that. I'm not sure that this is designed to scare people as much as to set the stage for law enforcement to, federal law enforcement to seize voting machines, to prevent people from, to challenge people at the polls, prevent them from voting, close down counts. That's what I honestly, that's more my fear than that the electorate itself will be intimidated.
Well, I mean, that's a valid point, Hal. And I would just say that I don't know that it matters how much he turns off voters if he and the Project 2025 people that are almost undoubtedly orchestrating all this believe that they can simply, weaponize ICE and use force to stop people from voting, who's stopping this man? I don't see anyone stopping him. Who's stopping this? I don't see it being stopped. He's just using force in the United States. He's turning troops against the citizens.
By the way, not just the United States, threatening our allies in NATO with an operation in Greenland, which really makes zero sense. This isn't all an ego trip by this guy, this narcissist. It's all about, him proving he's bigger, tougher. He's the biggest thing in the room. And I don't know how you deal with that except with a response in force. We're not seeing it. Now, do you think, Stephanie, and you and I both often shared our disdain for many members of the Democratic Party and the party itself? You're less, I think, harshly critical than I am, and you saw more good in the party than I did. But we both have our problems with it. Do you see the Democrat Party doing much, anything, enough to stop Trump? And if they're not, what do you want them to do differently? Anything here and there. Some things I think the Ellison lawsuit is a positive thing, but enough? No, absolutely not enough. I mean, and coming back to what you said about Trump's narcissism, one of the most convenient things about knowing someone is a narcissist is that makes them easy to manipulate. And it's not just that this is all about Trump's narcissism. This is about the Project 2025 and the entire army of people behind him that are able to use his narcissism as a way to use him to get what they want done. I mean, and these are not people who care about the Constitution. I honestly think a lot of it is, the South will rise again bullshit, right? So, but are they doing enough? No, because frankly, I mean, all of these people need to be in jail. Trump needs to be in jail. The entire lot of them need to be in jail, and the key thrown away. And Kristi Noem, all of these people up there lying, bald-faced lying about what we see transpiring on a videotape, completely fabricated. It's like something out of a dystopian novel, like any of the famous dystopian novels. You never thought you would live through this, Well, I mean, yeah, but it's very upsetting, and we don't know what to do, and that's what we're trying to figure out here. And so far, I'll be honest, I haven't figured it out. Just really haven't.
But I think we're both really concerned about elections and what this foreshadows for what they plan to do.
Stephanie, thanks so much for calling. It's so great to hear from you. I really appreciate it.
All right, bye.
We'll talk to Stephanie again soon, I hope, and I'm sure we will. So real quick, just back here, when can the president use the Insurrection Act? By the way, question from Phil following up. I guess the best way for me to get Phil to watch Halitics is to buy him a one-way ticket to Singapore, and then he'll be calling in frequently. That would be very cool indeed. I think I might use it for myself. I don't know. Never been to Singapore, or Asia for that matter. But the Insurrection Act authorizes the president to use the military to suppress insurrection if a state government requests it. There is some leeway in the president's discretion, such as whether the chief president considers that the unrest is obstructing laws of the United States. Well, that's a little bit misleading. Yes, the the state can request it. Obviously, Tim Walz and the Democratic legislature is not going to be asking for any assistance from Trump. But the Insurrection Act does provide, as the Times suggests, implies, he can do it on his own, or she can do it on her own if we had a woman president. And unfortunately, the law is pretty broad. It's pretty vague. It's pretty easy to kind of fit, wiggle your way into a justification for using it. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I am really happy to be getting calls today. So who do I have on the line right now?
This is your old friend Phil Damon calling back from Singapore.
Oh, it looked like a different number.
It is. No, it's we have different numbers because the other phone died. Hal, don't you see some semblance of the aggressiveness that people are criticizing of ICE in other countries like Venezuela and Iran, and perhaps in other areas where there's a militarized presence among the population? Is there an analogy there where you would think that our country is acting in ways that we often condemn in other countries?
Yeah. So, Phil, I would say, since you asked, I would say we act worse than what we condemn in other countries in a lot of different ways. And you mentioned Iran. I think you mentioned Iran on Facebook. You mentioned Venezuela. I mean, the country that comes to my mind that I think is the better analogy, and I think this is where maybe we really do disagree. I don't know. Maybe we don't. Is Israel. I would say that's where I would say there's a better analogy. Although I think we're a more democratic country than Israel, since every citizen here has, I think, kind of a say in the way government operates. It's not really the case there. But the dissent has more and more been cracked down upon both here and there. And I think that's where I would see the closest analogy. I think the situations in Iran and Venezuela are similar in that the protests that we saw, certainly we're seeing in Iran, and the opposition to the leadership, both Maduro now out by Trump's actions, and we don't know what's going to happen in Iran. I think a lot of the unrest in those countries is due to the U.S. Sanctions, U.S. policy that has made life almost intolerable for millions of people in those countries. And there I see that makes, what we do worse is it's our it's our security force, whatever you call it, CIA, our intelligence operations that are often stoking the protests, the rallies. We infiltrate groups there and we push them to take specific actions. We talk to their leaders and we cajole them to try to rally people to protest in the streets. I'm sure we cede money to them. So I think we have to bear responsibility for the coups that we're trying to engineer as well in those countries. That said, of course, these leaders can often be repressive and authoritarian as well. Long answer, Phil, your response if you want.
Sure. I certainly I would disagree on some of the theocracy versus democracy points, and that's for another call, and I don't want to hijack today's conversation, which I know is focused on Halitics on Minnesota. But I think the protests in Iran and their causes and the widespread protests, which are similar to, although on a much larger scale in Iran, 90 million people, much larger group of folks. But Iran has seen these widespread protests triggered by severe economic distress and skyrocketing inflation and collapsing currency, similar with Venezuela. Pressures driven in part by international sanctions. They restrict trade and oil and exports and banking access, on top of all the humanitarian issues. And it's interesting to me to, on one hand, criticize the Trump administration and ICE for things that we consider to be so inhumane, but also fail to recognize that the same administration really is, with Israel, working to destabilize Iran, which it certainly did this summer with its attacks on Iran, taking out much of its leadership, and trying to liberate in some way and help those folks obtain basic human rights that they don't really have, at least by many, many accounts. So it's interesting because I don't necessarily think it's so disparate, but I think that the protests that we see in this country and what we've seen, whether it's Free Palestine, whether it's pro-Israel, whether it's No King's Day, you see people coming to the streets and hopefully able to express their thoughts. But right now we're dealing with a very significant issue that could reshape one of the most important nations in history, the Persian culture, which is responsible for many of the science, math, and poetry that we enjoy still to this day and have enjoyed for thousands of years. But it's interesting here that our leadership hasn't come out in some way, Democrat, Republican, Green, or otherwise, and said, should we be involved in that? Should we not be involved in that? And is it a good thing where the people themselves are trying to claim independence by taking to the streets and really fighting and very bravely fighting against a militarized regime by many accounts? But I was curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that what the U.S. should be doing and what we should have been doing in Venezuela is talking to the leadership in those countries, talking to the presidents and the whoever's in charge, and, saying, hey, what can we do to help your people? We will work with you to the extent that you take your food off the throat of your people. We want to make life a little bit better. We want democratic reforms. We want an end to the theocracy. But we'll do it in ways that, will benefit Iranians, we'll do it in ways that will benefit Venezuelans. And I think that we just are such bad faith actors that we act in ways that are designed to benefit American corporate interests, Western corporate interests, the interests of the actual government elites in this country. So it's hard for me to take seriously the idea that the CIA is acting by destabilizing Venezuela, or the sanctions that we used that have caused so much unrest in those countries, so much really hardship in those countries. It's hard for me to see that as a pro-democracy move, because I don't think that's the end game. I don't think the goal is in any way to establish a democracy in either of those two countries, a true democracy, a true pro-people government. And I don't think, and clearly it wasn't, as far as we can tell, in Syria either, or in Libya. If that was the goal in Iraq, it would fail miserably in all those places. Maybe the jury's still out in Iraq and Afghanistan. These are all countries we have involved ourselves in militarily, and the results have been devastating for the people in those countries and continue to be, Phil. So that's, I don't see us as a force for good, I guess is what I'm saying.
But you think trying to have diplomacy, which the U.S. has engaged diplomatically with Iran and Venezuela for many years, it didn't just ignore dialogue entirely. But are you saying that trying to deal, say, with Khomeini or Maduro, who don't seem to have the same ideals and values that we have here in the U.S. or maybe in the West, Western Hemisphere at large, are you saying the better approach is to perhaps engage them more diplomatically and try to move the needle, or are you also saying maybe we shouldn't be involved at all? What manifest destiny do we have, if any? It's not really something that it's really not our business. Same with Greenland. The argument for Greenland is it's a security issue. Same with Venezuela, security issue, national security issue is a common argument there. But do you think that it's important to recognize that perhaps some of these cultures and leaderships don't really want to engage with us? They enjoy having a dictatorship or having an oppressive culture where in Iran, for example, as you know, there's not really the freedom there for the people that we enjoy here. How do you look at that and reconcile that with a notion of trying to help people and have a true democracy when clearly these are not places where people are free and they are greatly oppressed?
I don't, I guess part of where maybe we don't see eye to eye, Phil, is I don't see our motives as, it's not just that I see our motives as impure, because everyone's motives are impure. I think our motives are actually bad. I don't think we're acting in ways that are designed to, or with the ultimate goal of improving the quality of life of the people in those countries. So That's where I guess maybe you and I disagree. I don't think there's, people may fool themselves and say, oh, this is what the people in Venezuela, they'll be happy with us if we depose Maduro. But they may say that, but I don't think that's a reasonable view for people like Stephen Miller and Trump to take. I think it's clear that our actions have been designed to enrich and empower wealthy, powerful interests in this country and others who have influence over the government. And I don't think that's just Trump, by the way. I'm not just under Trump. I think that's what Biden was doing. I think that's what Obama did. I think that's clearly what George W. Bush and especially Dick Cheney did. So I think our actions are generally motivated by greed and power hunger rather than by a legitimate desire to help people. And I would say even if that were true, even with very poor motives, if the end result was a better life for those folks, I'd say, okay, well, hey, the proof is in the cake. The cake is good, even if the people who made it aren't very good people. But I don't think we're seeing. Let me ask it this way. Let me ask you this, Phil, because you're asking me quite a lot. Do you see our interventions in some of these countries as having had a salutary effect on the people living in them?
I think if you look at like Noriega and Panama, right, which might be somewhat analogous to Venezuela at this time, where you have Noriega, who is a Panamanian military officer, politician, basically the de facto ruler of Panama from 1983 to 89, who never really officially served as president of Panama, but instead ruled over Panama as an unelected military dictator through puppet presidents. Noriega gets essentially dethroned by military force. And whether or not we should go in or not go in, the argument often falls not only on humanitarian issues. Again, who are we to be saving the world? Is that our business? But is it a threat being so close to our borders? But if you look at Panama from 83 to 89 versus what it is today, it's certainly a very different kind of environment in Panama. It's a bustling city. It's an eco center for lots of amazing research and science and banking, and it's multicultural. It has all kinds of people. And that particular example, if you look at it as a microcosm of a larger motif, again, certainly not purely altruistic. I agree with you. I think there are other motives, and just because it's not altruistic doesn't mean it's not necessarily a net positive. I don't have enough security clearance to know really. Well, I agree with that. No, and I just interrupt there. I do agree with that point. And then, go ahead, and I have a final response. But continue, please. And thanks for hearing the discussion on it, which I appreciate. But I think if you look at the Panama and the Panamanian experiment over the last, let's just say, 35, 40 years, I think it's worked out very well for Panama. And I don't know that it needs to necessarily be purely altruistic with no benefit economically or otherwise for people who benefit, to have a net positive benefit for the globe or the individual countries that we're talking about, or America. And that's a different question than saying, should we even be there to begin with? I do agree with you that there is a lot of suffering that could otherwise be abated if the interests weren't so motivated by greed. But I also believe that many people who will make money also actually really want to help people. I don't think they just do it simply for money. I think a lot of people do a lot of these things to truly help people, or they believe they're helping people, because I do believe man is inherently good. Well, I'll just say this, Phil. I'll defer to you to a significant degree. I'm not familiar with the Panama experience. I actually was Googling Noriega while you were speaking. It's not I don't really have any real knowledge. So I certainly will take your word and believe, not just believe. I mean, if you tell me something, then I have reason to think it's true. So if you're saying that U.S. involvement in Panama has led to a better situation there, then, that's something I would normally be skeptical of, that statement, but I accept it. So, you know more about many of these countries than I, who knows virtually nothing about them. So that's good. I'm glad to hear that our actions have not been universally destructive. Well, I look forward to our family vacation together to Panama.
All right, Phil, it's great to hear from you. Panama, here we come. I'm going to drop him again. And by the way, confuse me with that second number, different area code. I'm not even sure. I guess that's me. I don't know where that's from. All right, we're just about at the end of the show. Used up a lot of time with two great callers. And that's what I want. That's really exactly what we want here. As I mentioned with regard to the Insurrection Act, I really don't want federal troops in the streets of Minneapolis. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think there's any case to be made. But I want to just show you a quote that I think is really interesting from, they call it BC. I don't know what BC is. I should know because they put it there. Don't. By the way, just back to Rogan. He doesn't move me. I don't really get the appeal. There are a lot of podcasters I like, and I find them to be intriguing and interesting, and he's not one of them. But I welcome his whenever he takes a position that I believe in or cause for his viewers to be, question authority, and he does that a lot. I think he's gotten a bad rap on the left. Remember, this is a guy, or at least from the Democratic side, this is a guy who endorsed Bernie in 2016. So, look, you take your allies where you can find them. This is an influential person. He's questioning what Trump's doing. This is very consistent with with what he said over the course of many years. So that's great. I'm not going to go smear him or attack him the way people like Kyle Kulinski invariably do. The Insurrection Act explained BC. I don't know, maybe it's not Boston College. I'm not really clear what that is, but I thought they did a real nice job. And I want to show, I mentioned to you that the Insurrection Act does not require for the deployment of troops within the U.S. borders. It does not require the state itself to request those troops. Under certain circumstances, the president does have the authority under the act to send troops in without the consent. And in fact, often when the state itself or the state government opposes those troops. And here you see that in Section 253 of the Insurrection Act, where it's a statute that codified after the fact to explain the limits of the Insurrection Act. The president can use the military in the state to suppress any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy. So I think that's like organized crime. That so hinders the execution of the laws that any portion of the state's inhabitants are deprived of a constitutional right, and state authorities are unable or unwilling to protect that right. And you can see that provision was used to enforce civil rights, to protect African Americans who had been so discriminated against in terrible ways for centuries. And Ike and JFK said, no, we're going to send in the U.S. military to protect students in Arkansas, to protect students in other states. We're trying to desegregate schools. And I think that's something that we on the left welcomed. We said, yeah, look, the states are doing bad things. Now, the large reason for that is because they had completely disenfranchised or largely disenfranchised Black people. But even now, these southern states are often, and not just southern, but we do see that southern states are acting in ways that I think many of us feel are counterproductive, harmful to many of the poor, struggling, and working people in those states. Even though there is no longer explicit denial of the right to vote. The simple fact is that even in Mississippi, which has, I believe, the highest percentage of Black people of any state, they're still a minority of the state. They're still outvoted by whites. To me, that's a lesson or a message to the Democratic Party. figure out a way to appeal to poor whites in those states. Present to them an economic program that will help them as much, that will help them as it helps poor black people. That, to me, is what Democrats should be doing, but they don't. In any event, there are times, I think, when we on the left say, no, the right thing is for the federal government. The federal government is governed by progressives, liberals, leftists. I don't know that Ike fits into any of those. Humane people, decent people. I think Ike was a decent person. When there are, when the federal government is the do-gooder and the states are the bad doer, then we do want to rely on, when necessary, when essential, troops to be sent in. Now, I don't think that the provisions of 253 legitimately cover what Trump wants to do. I don't think that it's clear that states' inhabitants are being deprived of any constitutional rights. And maybe you can make that argument and win. But there's a second part to it that also gives the president the right to send in troops when the state opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. Incredibly vague. They, under those circumstances, if there's insurrection, domestic violence, we are seeing, I guess, some attacks on federal troops, some attacks on federal officers. Apparently, when a man was shot yesterday in Minnesota, or when a man was being arrested, was being chased by a federal officer, two men came out of a building and started beating the ICE officer. I mean, I guess you'd call that domestic violence. It seems a little bit penny ante compared. It's not like a militia. It's not like, 100 people in the hills who are all armed to the hilt. And anytime the revenuer comes to try to collect money for their sales of moonshine, they get shot at. That seems to me more domestic violence. And if the governor refuses to take action, or when you have, lynching or what have you, you have a corporate police who are controlling a town. Those are situations, it seems, where 253 makes more sense. But with this Supreme Court, I doubt they'll say no to Trump. We gotta, echoing Stephanie's call and her fear that democracy will be, to the extent we still have any democracy left, the right to vote, that's under attack. Don't not vote. Don't not vote. All right, I'll be back tomorrow. It's the free for all. Thanks to my callers. Thank you for being part of Halitics, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.